Here we go. And good afternoon. Welcome back. It's been a while since we have shared a Friday together for our Teach series. I know that there are some of you, at least on here, that I recognize from attending our other Teach presentations, and we do want to welcome you back and say thanks for joining us. We plan to do at least 10 or 12 more Teach workshops this year, and so stay tuned. We'll have some great workshops coming up, including one about building your IEP binder. We're going to do that together. We will give you the printables or print it out for you if you need to, but we're going to build an IEP binder together so that you understand your role as an equal part of the IEP team, and how to get organized so that you have all of the tools you need, the information that you need in front of you in order to best advocate for your child and just to navigate that IEP journey. So that'll be our next one coming up in just a few weeks, and we'll be sending out an email about that as well. But we've got another workshop coming up later about inclusion. We have one for gen ed teachers specifically and one for paraprofessionals. So we still have a lot of great educational workshops coming up this year, and we do thank you for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth. I am the Director of Education at the Down Syndrome Connection of the Bay Area, and as you guys know, I'm here for you if you need me. Anything education related, IEP support, things related to virtual learning or the transition back into schools, as some of us are doing at this time. Evidence-based approaches, behavior and communication supports in a classroom setting, etc. I'm your woman. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. You can see my address, email address is listed here on the first page. And then for all the other things that you could find, including past Teach workshops, we have those listed on our website, including not only our PDFs, sorry, just letting someone into our waiting room. Not only are our PDFs available on our website, but right now our tech gal is working on uploading all of the actual videos. We'll have those on a YouTube channel, and we'll provide links to those. So all of our previous Teach workshops will be available on the recordings, as well as those PDF presentations, which are already available on our website. If you're not on our website consistently looking at all the great resources and links to wonderful information we have, get on there. There's a ton of resources on there, and a lot of stuff you can share with your team, especially for those of you who are starting those thoughts about transitioning back into on-site learning. And we're all going to need as much support as we can get. So we're here for you. And today's topic I'm really excited about because it's arguably the best part of my job. I love so many aspects about my job. I'm grateful every single day to do the work that I do, but these ability awareness presentations just get me right here every single time. They are, it's really one of the most rewarding aspects of my job. So I realized we talk about ability awareness presentations. We let our families know that we do them. We've let education teams know we do them, and we put ourselves out there, but we haven't really broken it down into, like, what does this mean? What is an ability awareness presentation? What does it look like right now in this kind of virtual or hybrid learning environment? And you know, how do you get one? So I thought what we'd do is go ahead and kind of give you an introduction into what an ability awareness presentation is. This is for parents, caregivers, educators. You don't have to have a child with Down syndrome or be a teacher of a student with Down syndrome to invite ability awareness presentations into your school to help educate peers and students about various abilities and things we have in common, as well as, you know, the differences that can actually bring us together. So this is a really cool thing, and we offer it for free to school. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that. and then I'll give you some time to answer some questions. I'm also included, with the permission of one of our parents and members, an ability awareness presentation, the most recent one that I just did. It's totally customizable, and it gives you a little bit of a taste of what your student or your child could have presented for their class. So let's get into it here. Again, I don't anticipate this is going to be a full hour, although I'm a chatty Kathy, so you never know. But I just, again, wanted to introduce this to you so you have a better understanding, because once you have a better grasp of what this is and how cool it is, then it will give you the info you need to push it to your school and say, you guys need this. It's a win-win. All right. So what is an ability awareness presentation? Well, it's totally customizable, as any PowerPoint presentation would be. It's free. We offer it for free, and it's an educational presentation for school-aged kids. So kiddos, kindergarten through 12th grade, generally, although we've actually done adult ability awareness presentations before. So, it's customizable. We're flexible. It's all about bringing awareness to people who need it. So, but we do just kind of categorize it as, for this purpose, for school-age kiddos between kindergarten and 12th grade. We have found, in that preschool setting or that pre-K setting, it still is a bit abstract. We have gone into schools in that pre-K and TK setting, and not to say that we wouldn't or that you can't, but sometimes we do feel like some of the concepts are just still a little bit hard to grasp for that age. So these presentations, until March of 2020, took place on site in schools. So we would go to your child or your student's classroom, or we'd even do big assembly style presentations, which is our favorite, because the more people we can reach and educate, then the better for us and the better for everybody. But it is a presentation that can be done in that classroom setting, on a larger assembly scale, in that kind of format, or both. A lot of times we've done presentations in the classroom about a focused student, and then we've been able to bring that broader message to the rest of the student body in assembly style sessions, so that everyone at school, not just the kids in that class, can understand this a little bit more about the student with Down syndrome at their school. So it's approximately 35 to 45 minutes, also super flexible with that. We want to meet the needs of our teachers and our schools and the timing that they have. So with respect to that, we can kind of customize the time as well. It's an interactive discussion. We really want to involve the students in this learning process. We know that our students with Down syndrome, and I know for myself, I learn by getting into it, by getting my hands wet, by getting my feet in there, by experience it. I learn from hands-on discussion, interaction, activities. And so we want to make sure that our students are a part of the conversation. So it's an interactive discussion about Down syndrome. We talk about the strengths and the challenges associated with having cognitive and physical disabilities. So we're really giving students an opportunity to really understand what it means to have Down syndrome. And we're bringing up disabilities, which is something that we need to talk about. And helping them understand Down syndrome is just one type of many different types of disabilities. And overall, we're trying to give students a better understanding about how they can support a peer at school who has a disability. We really want to give them a safe space to be able to ask questions, candid questions. So we'll get a little bit more into that. Typically, when we do a presentation for kiddos who are in early elementary school, we do tend to ask that the focus student is not in the classroom setting. We want to give his or her peers a safe space to ask anything. And it may be about the peer in their classroom. Sometimes they ask questions that are very point blank. Kids will be honest and direct, and they may ask a question that could feel a little hurtful to that focus student. And considering how We know that individuals with Down syndrome generally have a much higher receptive language ability and comprehension. We want to model that that student understands that we're having a conversation, that student likes that we're having a conversation, and is supporting that we're not talking about that student who's not in the classroom, but that student wants you to have a safe space to be able to ask anything you want, and there's no such thing as a silly question. So that's kind of the angle we take, right? So we want to give teachers and students the safe space to have a really candid discussion about Down syndrome. And so unless our student's a little bit older and is able to advocate and answer questions for him or herself, then we tend to have that focus student out of the classroom. So there are tons of benefits. I could go on and on and on about all of the benefits of having an ability awareness presentation at your school. Of course, I see this a lot as far as the strengthening of connections. We have a lot of students who have ability awareness presentations in their classroom every single year. And some of these kids have heard the same or similar presentation every year, but I find that they are engaged. They can't wait to answer questions. They can't wait to tell you about how they remembered what they heard last year and how they put it into practice this year. I've never seen kids more eager to participate, to understand. It's so inspiring, especially, over the past year where we've had so many contrasting points of view and so many people standing up on the opposite sides of what they believe in, and to actually be able to be in a classroom setting or a virtual classroom setting with these kids who are engaged, who care, who want to learn. It gives you hope, right? It gives you hope for the future. So I know that these participations educate and bring awareness to other students. Evidence shows that typical peers who are educated alongside peers with disabilities will become more empathetic. They will become more involved in their communities. You will experience less bullying from those individuals. So why not start early, right? Start with these types of presentations in the classroom. It truly strengthens those connections between typical students and students who are disabled in different ways, not just students with Down syndrome. It builds awareness and empathy. It truly does. I've had kids who have told me after a presentation, have walked out and said, I want to do this for a living. How can I do this? I want to do this at my school. How can I do this at other schools? What can I want to spread this word, and it's so inspiring, and I can't tell you enough. And how many kids have come up and said, I did not know this about my friend. I thought he didn't want to talk to me. I thought he was bored and didn't care about what we were playing. He didn't answer, so I just thought he didn't want to be my friend. And now I know what I can do to be his friend, right? There's nothing like it. The other, a huge benefit is that it's not just for the kids. Teachers learn a lot from our presentations. I had a teacher come up to me who said, I had no idea that waiting 10 seconds after I asked my student a question would mean the difference in everything in our entire relationship. Just waiting 10 seconds to after I ask a question, to elicit a meaningful response, utilizing that one tip has changed the relationship I have with my student. And not only that, it's changed the way my other students communicate with that student, because I'm modeling and I am reminding my students of this strategy. And now these students are actually getting more meaningful answers from this peer. They understand why it takes a little extra time, and now they're starting to make meaningful connections. So teachers, paras, we have principals and specialists sit in because there's a lot to learn. It's a great opportunity, and not to plug us, but we're a great resource here. We're a free resource. We are we are specialists and our area of expertise is in with students with Down syndrome. We understand their learning profile, behavior, communication, and we offer a wealth of resources for free, professional development opportunities, training, consultation, in-school observations. We'll provide you with communications materials for free. And so this is a great kind of warm handshake, right? This is like a great way to introduce your school, especially if you have a young kiddo who's just now starting to get into school and you really want to build a healthy foundation with your education team in your school. And you want to kind of spearhead, right, this revolution and embracing diversity and embracing and including, embracing inclusion and really helping kids, kind of be a part of the systemic change we're all going for. And so by saying, hey, my child has Down syndrome, this is an organization who's a premier resource in the Bay Area for 22 years who can help you understand more about a student with Down syndrome. And not only that, but individuals with disabilities and best practices. And now you can be a premier school who is modeling for everyone else around your area about how to embrace diversity and inclusion and engage in best practices. It's a wonderful way to introduce us and a wonderful way for us to build a meaningful partnership with your school and your district to be able to provide ongoing support to them, which in turn helps you and your kiddo out, right? We offer free trainings, consults, workshops, resources. It's totally a win-win. So yeah, introduce us to your school. We're here to help. Also, this is not just for younger kiddos. My friend Eli here, who is a self-advocate, he has a job with us as well as at his old elementary school. And he is such an awesome partner we do these ability awareness presentations together. If they're in his area and he's super self-sufficient and gets on BARD or gets on Muni and gets to where he needs to be. So if it's within where he's, where Eli lives, he can come with me and we can talk to a classroom. Now, obviously this is, he can't come with me physically right now to a classroom, but we can do virtual sessions. But Eli can join me. He can answer questions about what it means to have Down syndrome, how it feels inside. We can really have these candid conversations, and Eli doesn't mind answering any question. That being said, if you're a parent or a teacher of a teenager who has Down syndrome and you're interested in your child or student in becoming a self-advocate, someone who can speak about his own experience and really send that message home to students who are able to actually have a conversation with an individual with Down syndrome, I mean, that's an amazing opportunity as well. We have a lot of flexibility and a lot of different opportunities for you to engage in this kind of education and awareness in your area. And again, if you have a teenager or a young adult with Down syndrome, they may be interested in helping out. And we'd love to hear more from you guys if you do have someone who you think would be a great self-advocate. So from here, I think what we've got, yeah. So I wanted to just kind of run you through a presentation. So they've come a long way. They've evolved over the last several years. It kind of started out with my friend Eli there. We'll put him back on Eli just for a second. His mom, who was my predecessor as the director of education, Jennifer Cooper, she's an amazing individual, and she was Eli's best warrior and advocate. She kept him in general education through his entire school career, if you will, his entire journey, educational journey. And by the time they were in middle school, Eli was in middle school, he created a friends group called Cooper's Troopers. Their last name's Cooper. And he and his buddies, his typical buddies, had this group, and their mom would take them around to different schools in the area in Berkeley, and he and his peers would give these ability awareness presentations. Mom started him with him, and then soon Eli became an adolescent and he wanted his friends with him and not his mom. And so from that, we started growing it. So what started out as kind of being Eli's story, and we took Eli's story and we would go to different schools with Eli's story, and it was specific to Eli. Well, now, especially now that we're doing things virtually, and we have a lot of flexibility with our PowerPoint presentations versus just using like a book, a fictional book, or again, Eli has his own book out through Eli's eyes. Now we can really, really customize these experiences. And so I want to kind of give you an idea about our ability awareness presentations. This is a fully customized PowerPoint presentation about my friend Will, who is a third grader on the peninsula, and his mom gave me permission to share his story. This is a K through, we did this last year, and this was a K through 2 presentation. And we tend to, again, it's super customizable, but we tend to lean away from too much science in those earlier, K through 2 or 3 presentations. And then once we're getting a little bit older into like the 3rd grade and beyond, we do start to dive a little bit into the science behind Down syndrome, which I think that most kids are really intrigued to know that there's this one chromosome, right, that separates them from someone with Down syndrome. So this is an example of a K through 2 to 3 presentation. We've added a little science behind it, but it's mostly all about just reaching out to these kiddos on their level of learning about understanding Down syndrome, understanding what a disability is, and understanding some of the strengths and challenges, as well as how to be a good friend, which is kind of the overarching message that we're sending no matter what age. So here we go. Let's talk about Down syndrome. This is Will's story. So what I love is that these students talk about building empathy. They're seeing pictures, real life, and we're really customizing it. So we talk here, right, that Will's just a boy who loves to play and learn, right, just like you. And he loves spending time with his friends, just like you. He's silly and smart and creative and talented, right? So we're building those connections. We're making Will just a normal human being, right? There's only one thing that separates Will from you. He has Down syndrome, and that's fine. Let's talk about it. And we let him know it's okay if you don't know yet. You're gonna know. You're gonna learn all about it. And so then we go into explaining what Down syndrome is. And I know we're kind of in that. I find that at different schools, we're in that place now where sometimes people want to use differently abled or different abilities, etc. That's perfectly okay. We also feel it's perfectly okay to acknowledge what a disability is, because it is something that can make it harder or impossible to do certain things. When you're talking with students who are in kindergarten or 2nd grade or 3rd grade, saying differently abled, we all have strengths, right? It kind of talks about how we just all have strengths. Whereas when we talk about a disability, it's helping build the empathy for someone who is born with a disability, who doesn't have any control over what this is, and that they have to work even harder than you do because there are certain challenges that come with having this disability. So we don't think that that it's a bad thing to recognize that a disability, is something. And the fact that Down syndrome is both a cognitive and a physical disability that affects your cognitive processing. It affects your ability to to take in information and to be able to give that feedback right away. And then also, as a physical disability, affects your entire body from head to toe. It's important for people to understand that a disability is something, and that, but it doesn't define you, right? And so that's the message that we're trying to convey to other kiddos. And then you'll see on the next slides how we try to then break that down into a more relatable piece. So We talk about how my friend Will was born with Down syndrome. You can't catch it. It's not like a cold. If he sneezes, you're not going to get Down syndrome, right? But we also just talk about how it's just one piece of who he is, right? It was one thing he was born with, one trait. And that we all have different traits, right? Some of us are similar, but most of us, we're all a little different from one another. So then we ask our kiddos, we ask students questions like, well, what unique traits do you have, right? And we're asking peers to kind of look around. I've got blonde hair. He's got black hair. I've got light skin. He's got dark skin. I have blue eyes. She has green eyes. I'm tall. He's short. I have long fingers. He has little fingers. We can all start to see all of the little tiny differences in all of us. And, and then keeping in mind that Will just has one tiny little difference. And I love to use this visual of the 23 chromosomes kind of in that sock pairing, the crazy sock kind of association that people make with trisomy 21. But using this as a visual example, it's amazing to see what kids, they're like, wow, really? A, that's in my body in every single cell. That's so cool. And B, really? Down there where those three are clumped together, that's it? I have two and he has three. That's the only thing. And that visual representation really hits home with a lot of kids, and they're really intrigued by that. And so then we get into understanding, how Down syndrome affects the student. There are some things that are easy for Will. And, he's an awesome athlete. I keep telling his parents he needs to get right into Special Olympics. That's a huge strength. Excellent social skills, excellent empathy for others, and a great reader. And I talk about all of these things that make him, his superpowers, that make him an awesome guy. And then we talk about how there are some things that are harder for him, that his disability will affect his ability to be great with handwriting. Sometimes his communication, it's going to be harder to hear him. And so it affects your body and your mind. So it's going to make some things harder to learn and harder to do. But then we bring it back to that student who's listening to the presentation, and we're saying, well, what about you? What are things you're really good at? What are things that come very naturally to you? And what are some things that were really super hard? I like to give examples of things that were hard for me and make common connections with the students who are there. And they really start getting into it, thinking about the things that come easy to them, pretty easily, and then some things that are not so easy, that they had to really practice and work hard at. We definitely get a lot into the physical disability component, because I think a lot of times even teachers underestimate how much the physical disability impacts our students with Down syndrome. From just being able to navigate classroom routines, make it from point A to point B, sit and attend at circle time when they've got hypotonia and they're just trying to sit on their own and just attend. The fact that, trying to manipulate things, use your fingers and hands, that, understanding. And I have the students try things. I have them, wiggle their toes and kind of rock their knees back and forth, or move their arms around and make their heads go side to side. Are there parts on their body they can wiggle, their nose or their ears? These are all affected by our muscles. And when we help our students understand that individuals with Down syndrome, all of them are born with hypotonia, or loose and stretchy muscles, kind of like a rubber band, and helping them understand that kids with Down syndrome are not weaker. As a matter of fact, they have to work much harder than you because their muscles are longer and they're stretchier. It helps them understand when they see their friend who kind of goes to the ground, or who they see their friend who might have a flat effect We talk about that with the older students, the flat effect of maybe looking kind of like you're zoned out and maybe your tongue is protruding, that has nothing to do with being bored or not understanding the content or being too tired. That has to do with low muscle tone. And it's amazing, the reactions you get from kids when they finally understand, oh, he's not just always tired or he just doesn't care what's happening. His muscles are worn out because he has to work twice as hard as we do just to get, from class to recess to library, come back, sit down during circle time, sit up at a chair and do work, hold a pencil or a crayon or a paint and try to write. These things are tough and take a lot of extra work and practice. And it's good for them to understand. But that's why they see those kinds of things happening. And then communication, huge piece here. So being able to help students, remember and realize and understand that your tongue is a muscle, and that that same hypotonia affects every muscle in your mouth, your lips, your jaw, your tongue. And the reason it's harder to understand our friends with Down syndrome is because of that. It makes it harder for them to speak, and they have to do mouth exercises. They go to the mouth gym. They work with specialists who help them work on making their sounds. We tell students, I have my students, because they love to interact and engage, and I'll have my students do things like, I'll model a certain letter sound or movement, like ooh wee ooh ah oh la 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 ma 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 da 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 da, and they're practicing it and they're doing it in real time, and I'm letting them know, like, do you feel all of the ways you have to move your mouth just to make a sound? And it helps them understand a little bit more about how frustrating that would be to have something that you have to say, to have an idea, a thought, and a feeling, and not to be able to express it because of those loose and stretchy muscles that affect you from head to toe, including your mouth. They start to really gain an understanding and an empathy for their friend. They just thought you didn't get it or just couldn't talk. And because of that, they couldn't relate. So this is a great way to help engage students and think about how frustrating that would be. As a matter of fact, I take my students a lot of times on a journey to an island. Let's say you got on an airplane and it flew you into the middle of somewhere in the middle of nowhere. You have no idea where you are. And when you land, you speak your language and the people there speak their language. You do not understand theirs and they do not understand yours. How else could you communicate if you couldn't use some of my witty students will say, well, use Google Translator. I have to remember that. Yes. So if you can't use Google Translator, how could you use your body? How could you use, different things in your environment to be able to communicate? It's kind of like playing detective. And they love to think about the different ways a person can communicate, but it also helps them understand how they can play detective and help communicate with their friend who may not have the expressive language abilities they have. But now they understand my friend has something to say, my friend wants to express something, but those loose and stretchy muscles make it hard. So now I'm going to try harder to elicit that meaningful answer from my friend. And we're going to start using bodies or gestures or signs or draw pictures or whatever we can to help solve that problem. And so it's a really quite poignant exercise for these students to understand and start to build that empathy so that they can start actively supporting their peer. So a big piece of this is we really want to get into helping students understand how they can help. How can you be a good friend to someone with a disability? We're honest. We let them know that it's tough for individuals with disabilities to make friends. Sometimes I break it down and I say, I get it. And I remember a boy in my school who had Down syndrome when I was little. And I didn't know how to talk with him at first. I didn't know if I should speak more slowly, if he was interested or not interested at all. I didn't know if I needed to treat him like a baby. What do you do? I don't know if he even likes me or if he doesn't want to talk to me, and it can make you feel nervous, and it can make you feel a little anxious about trying to have a friendship or trying to start a friendship with someone if you don't know if they want to or if they can't communicate the same way you can. And so I come from a place of empathy and help them understand that it's okay to feel like that, but that kids with Down syndrome want to be treated like everybody else. And so even though at this point, right, we had to include, like, we can't all safely hang out right now in groups, right? But when it is safe to do so, you can do those things. You can invite your peer with a disability to a birthday party, sit with them at lunch, play with them at recess. And, in the meantime, say hi when you see your peer in your Zoom session for your classroom. Now, I have to say, my student Will here, and I actually work with Will and do supplemental academic work with him. And his mom sent me a video of his classmates in his virtual classroom setting, how they all are, bye, Will, hi, Will, how's it going? And he gets to say hi and bye to all of them at the end. He's fully included in general ed. And that was a tough fight. That did not come easy, but he is succeeding beyond their wildest dreams. And his class, I remember how engaged his class was when they were participating in this presentation. And I remember the feedback I got from his teachers and the principal of the school. I loved how customized it was. I loved how they really got to really understand Will. And these pictures really helped represent who Will is as a person, not just the kid in their class who speaks a little differently or looks a little different and doesn't seem to understand everything that they understand. They started really seeing him as a human being. And now he's just so successful in this virtual environment. And I could hear his peers being so supportive and his teacher being like super inclusive. And, it's just little things like this, helping bring awareness, understanding, and supporting these students so that they know what to do. This is probably their first experience being educated alongside a peer with Down syndrome. They need some help. And it's amazing what you'll see as a difference as a result of just having that little bit of knowledge and a few little tips and strategies up their sleeve. It goes a long way. We we talk about best practices. So I talk about the 10-second rule. I make sure they understand that just because someone has a difficult time expressing him or herself does not mean they don't have anything to say. And we do the activity about the island, and we talk about playing detective. And I make sure they understand that your friend with Down syndrome understands a lot more than he can say. So please do not talk about him around him. And you'd be amazed how many teachers realize that that's probably not a good idea. So we're teaching best practices along this whole thread. And again, I think that teachers gain a lot from hearing these presentations that we built for their students. But we're giving best practices like offer choices, right? So instead of saying, Will, do you want to play basketball? Say, Will, do you want to play basketball or soccer? And you're probably going to elicit a more meaningful answer. Them understanding things like that means a world of difference in their ability to be able to meaningfully engage with Will and learn a little bit more about who he really is as a person, what he really wants to do or doesn't want to do. And then finally, we talk about, right, how this person, this student, this peer, this friend is more like you, right, than unlike you. It's Down syndrome is just one thing that makes this student different, but mostly he's just like kids. just like you. And so we go through some examples. A lot of times I ask families, send me in something that really normalizes your child, things that the other students can relate to. And they're like, oh, he's just like me. He goes to the pool. He has brothers and sisters and, parents, and they go on outings. He likes Twix. He loves different things, right? And then there's some of our members and some of the kiddos I've worked with Down syndrome have these really cool things they can share that are not necessarily as normalizing, but kind of like superstar-y, right? And so it makes them actually stand out and stick out, which I think is great. I have a couple of students I work with who are models. They model for like Baby Gap and Pottery Barn. They've been in commercials. They've been in TV shows and movies. And so they've got like pictures of them doing wild and crazy stuff. Will is a great adventurer. He's gone on a ton of different vacations to really cool spots that kids love. It's okay too, right? We're normalizing, but also saying, and hey, look, he's got some superpowers, or he's got these cool interests or hobbies or vacations or opportunities that maybe not everyone else has. And maybe you're thinking, I'd like to be a little more like Will, actually. So we try to encourage that as well. So these are just examples of things that he loves that, again, that are relatable, that normalize him. They're just like other kids his age, hanging out with his brother and doing outdoor adventures, spending time with family. And just being a kid, right? Because I think that's kind of what we're trying to convey, is that more than anything, these kiddos with Down syndrome in school have a lot more in common with their friends than their friends probably realize. And we want to convey that message so that their friends feel empowered. They feel empowered with knowledge. They want to spread that and model it to other peers. They want to engage and challenge themselves by, practicing the things they learned. And we want to inspire them, to learn more about people with disabilities, to become those people that end up having a lot of empathy, less bullying, become productive members of the community who are doing good community service. And these types of presentations help cultivate that kind of community, which is what we all want in the long run. And basically at the end, I always ask my students to tell me one thing that they've learned about Down syndrome in particular. And so I call on students, they raise a hand and they tell me some of the things they learned about. That might be the loose and stretchy muscles. It might be that there's one extra chromosome. So it's all kind of related to Down syndrome, right? Or they have a harder time speaking. Wait 10 seconds before you ask again or walk away so you can get a meaningful answer. And then I ask them how they tell me one thing, how they can, what they learned about how they could be a good friend or support someone with a disability. And then they can start telling me some of the strategies I taught, or inclusion, invite them to your party or recess, sit down next to them at lunch, help, but don't help too much. There are other, when we get into the older age groups, we also talk, we get serious about some things. We talk about the R word. We talk about its origin. We talk about why it's offensive. We have some pretty candid discussions about bullying and how people with disabilities can be more targeted for bullying. And so this is an example of our earlier kiddo years, but for our older students, we do get into some of those subjects as well, which we believe are super important to discuss. And so those also might be some of the things and some of the feedback that we get from students. And then finally, we give our students an opportunity to ask questions, candid questions, and we get all kinds of them. And we give them a safe space to do so. And by the end, we ask, all right, now how much do you know about Down syndrome? Raise a hand if you know something about Down syndrome. And every student raises his hand, where we might have only had about half or a third or just a couple people from the class raise a hand. So virtually, We haven't tried this yet, but when I do my on-site presentations, we actually include an empathy activity. We do a marshmallow activity where kiddos will put a marshmallow in their mouths, between their roof of their mouth and their tongue, turn to a partner and say a sentence, and the partner has to guess what they said. And that is supposed to give them an idea of what it may feel like to have that low oral motor tone, those loose and stretchy muscles that keep you from being able to say everything you need to say clearly and articulately with lots of intelligibility. And then we ask the participants to talk about their experience as a speaker, if it was frustrating, if you had to repeat it a whole lot, if you were starting to get a little annoyed by it, or as a listener, did you find yourself leaning in closer, lending an ear a little bit closer, reading lips? Did you have to ask more than once? Did you find yourself being a more patient listener? And so we're giving students an opportunity to experience what it's like to be the speaker and the listener, and be able to give feedback and provide those experiences to us. Another one is a sock handwriting activity, or hey, now that we're all virtual, putting a sock on your hand and trying to use a keyboard, right, is a great way to kind of simulate having that low motor tone, that having the hypotonia in your hands and your fingers, why it makes things like fine motor skills and typing and lacing, all of those things difficult. Excuse me, I talked too much and I didn't bring any water. But those two activities are kind of our go-tos. I generally do the marshmallow activity because communication is such a big piece when it comes to making these social connections, meaningful connections with peers. Peers are less concerned, excuse me, about a student's ability to write than they are about actually making meaningful connections. So the marshmallow activity, and if you have like kiddos with sensitivities, vegan, vegetarian, you can do like a mandarin orange slice. And we haven't tried it virtually, but not to say that that's something we couldn't do. And so finally, how do you schedule one? So sorry, guys. I just remembered I did bring water. There we go. So if you're a parent or a caregiver and you would like for us to do an ability awareness presentation at your school, then you can contact your education team and connect us, connect them with the Down Syndrome Education Alliance, DSEA, me, and we can arrange that. If you're a teacher or a professional who either is working with a child with Down syndrome, or you just want to bring more awareness, understanding, empathy, and education to your students, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to coordinate that with you as well. Let's see. World Down Syndrome Day is March 21st. So this month is kind of a great opportunity to schedule an ability awareness presentation in recognition of World Down Syndrome Day. If you do schedule your school or class for an ability awareness presentation, I'm going to be sending out some supplemental digitized like take-home lessons to just kind of review some of the things that we discuss in our presentation, just to keep it on the minds of our students who are going home. So it doesn't have to be like an actual homework assignment, but can be kind of an optional supplemental activity they can share with their families. Their families gain a better understanding about what they're learning at school regarding disabilities and Down syndrome. And finally, anyone can give this presentation. It doesn't have to be me. I've had parents who give the presentation. I have teachers who give the presentation. If you have a teen or young adult who would like to give his own presentation, maybe with a peer support, you can do that too. And if you'd like to have access to the template of this presentation so that you can just kind of fill in the blanks, we can do that too. We're super flexible here. So with that, that's our ability awareness presentation in a nutshell. I hope that you have gained a bit of an understanding of why it's such a great thing to have, a great thing to take advantage of, and the impact, the actual real tangible positive impact it can make on your school, your teachers that work with your student or your child, the peers in the classroom, and ultimately your child, the individual with Down syndrome. So I hope you're excited about these. I hope you're ready to schedule yours. And at this point, if anyone has any questions, we've got a small room today, so please feel free to ask away. And I can kind of just like look around to see if anyone has a hand raised or wants to ask a question. And looks like, because we can look in the chat, but because we don't have that many people, I'm like, let's take a look and see if we've got anything in chat.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
It's Christine. How are you?
Christine.
Hi. I just sent that question to you in the chat because I was trying to think about how this would be best delivered in the remote environment. And I didn't know if, like, when we were going to connect with you and the teacher, like how much time would be the recommended minimum amount of time for the presentation to make it meaningful and helpful to the kids and obviously the teachers in the school, if that's as broad as it's going to go. So I didn't know if you had a set amount of time in mind. And I would love to have this actually for our son's school. In class, and he's actually going to be featured as a star student in a couple of weeks, but I wish it was, we need more planning time, I think, to do it. But I'm worried about like the amount of time that's required given the schedule is so tight in the remote environment. So I'm kind of wondering if you had some initial thoughts about that.
Yeah, Christine. That would be awesome to come to your school and do a presentation. And, to be honest with you, a lot of teachers are happy and welcoming with this presentation because it takes about 35 to 45 minutes out of their schedule where they can kind of take a deep breath for a second. At least is the feedback I've gotten from a lot of teachers. It is generally, so when I do it in person, it at the most takes 45 minutes with the empathy activity. Obviously, we're cutting this down, and I'm literally giving a story, right, about a student, and then we cut straight to the question and answer piece. And if we're not including the empathy activity, I think to be able to still get in a meaningful presentation, we can do it in as little as, I've done it in a half hour. I would prefer 35 to 40 minutes, but depending on the age of the kids, etc. At least a half hour, but anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes, we should be able to get all of the key, main ideas across, be able to address questions and answers, and make it really meaningful for everybody. So it's not a huge chunk of time.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? And Christine, did that help?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Raquel.
It doesn't hurt. Hey, it doesn't hurt to ask, since he is the star student. It doesn't hurt to ask, to say, hey, this is something I just learned about with Down Syndrome Connection. Do you guys, no pressure at all, of course, but do you think, since he's star student that week, that it would make sense? And World Down Syndrome Day is this month, and maybe it makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Oh, I see.
Yeah. Hi, this is Raquel.
Hi, Raquel.
Hi.
Long time no hear from. No, I'm kidding.
I know, the emails. Thank you so much. This was like an answer to prayer, actually. I love your presentation. Thank you so much. This is really helpful. I think it's wow, because as a mom, of a child with Down syndrome, one of the first things, even when she was first born, was, is she going to be bullied? Like the whole target for bullying. So I feel like this is such a beautiful plan that can help with that. So I'm really excited about it. Thank you for that. My question is, so my daughter is, very tiny as a result of our family genetics plus the Down syndrome. So even though she's going to be 5, she's going to be starting kindergarten this coming September, but size of a 3-year-old. You kind of alluded to this, and I don't know if your presentation, or like you said, it can be customizable, but that whole concept of how, I always get afraid that she has so many abilities, but so many people are going to want to kind of baby her, like, oh, here's the cute, oh, let me help her, let me help her, let me help. And that is going to, like, you know, I kind of want her to pull forward and, you know, just give as much help as she needs. Don't, you know, so I don't know if you could talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question, Raquel. And so, you know, when I talk about the customization of these, in the kind of general one that we would give a lot. And so with Will, knowing him the way I do, knowing his class, and knowing kind of the information we've already like given them before, we customized his presentation. That being said, help but not help too much is a huge key piece that we talk about with students. We talk about kind of learned helplessness in, you know, in the way of talking with students about it, and depending on their ages. We also talk about not treating someone like a baby. So I'll use things about I'll use examples as far as like riding a bike, and how we all had to try it and get on, and you know, we fall off and we get on and we fall off and finally we're getting it. But if we're helping and treating, you know, individuals with Down syndrome, you know, too much, if we're helping too much or treating them like a baby, they're not going to be able to experience those successes. So we absolutely do cover that big time. And I think that when we can take this individualized approach, it's helpful because we can talk about her size, and we can talk about some of the physical characteristics that you know, are found in individuals with Down syndrome, and that sometimes they're smaller. It doesn't, and kind of playing into that thing though, it doesn't mean she's weaker, right? She has to work twice as hard as you. And so, yeah, and then that's the great thing about these is that you can really provide, you know, your knowledge. You're your child's best expert, and you can say, these are the things that I'm really concerned about, and or hey, this is some feedback I got from our teachers. This is what she's seeing in the classroom, and we're able to really take those points to help the students understand, you know, some specific things that are, you know, really pertain to that individual student, which I do all the time. Yeah.
Thank you. And a follow on to that, would you recommend these presentations to be done? Like, for example, like I said, it's the first time she's going to go into kindergarten. I'm not sure, she had kind of like a private school assessment. So I'm not sure she's actually going to, you know, make it into that, or if we're going to go to the public school, I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But would you recommend that like she be in that school setting for a little while so the teacher and everybody can kind of observe and then do this kind of thing, or right from the get-go it's better to do it like before they get to know Anna? Do you know what I mean?
You know, I think that, you know, I think that there's right there are benefits to both. I think that it's important to kind of tackle the discussion and the topic so that people don't feel uncomfortable about it, and to say, look, we're acknowledging this, we recognize it, it's nothing to be embarrassed about or ashamed of, it's okay, we all have differences and this is what this is. At the same time, by having her participate, so I think you can still have that transparency, right, going into things, and then maybe giving her a little time to settle in, while still being transparent about, you know, who she is, and but giving kids an opportunity to be able to experience an environment, you know, with her in it, so that they have more meaningful questions to ask, especially at that age. You know, it's a little more difficult for kids at that age to even kind of grasp these concepts, and then to be able to come up with like a question that is meaningful to them, that like pertains to that student. And so maybe a little time with that would be helpful, as far as at least being able to elicit like meaningful questions from the kids. But from an informational standpoint, it's never too early to start, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I figured the teacher would probably appreciate it more too, because in September they're all busy anyways.
Yeah.
Maybe wait till they settle in. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excited about it.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, Elizabeth, I have one more quick question. Can you just briefly touch upon like what the process is? So I know we can email you to request that. Do we then preemptively email the teacher and say that we've reached out to you and that you're going to be connecting with them? And then also, like, what is the time frame that's needed to like tailor the presentation? So I know you have like a template that you use, but then as far as putting in specifics to a, you know, a specific child, like how do you do those iterations to incorporate the specifics with the parent or teacher if they've requested it?
Yeah, it's actually pretty super easy. So basically reaching out to your school, saying this is something that you would, you know, seeing if they've got a buy-in that sounds good to them. And then generally a parent will just connect me through email with the teacher. And then all three, figure out, they let me know what works for their schedule. I'll let them know what works for mine. So we kind of determine from a logistical standpoint a good day and time. And then from there, generally that's not going to be like that week or the next day. But even if it's the following week, as long as I've got a parent sending me the information that I need via email, then we can build the presentation very easily. They just generally parents will just then email me pictures if it's not a student that I'm already super familiar with, or if there's some very specific concerns regarding that child's participation in the classroom, think questions or issues that the teachers had or that the students have had that we really need to address. Otherwise I'll just gather some more information from you, like an intake, if you will, about about strengths, motivators, interests, and then about some things that might be a little more challenging or that you feel are his biggest obstacles, so that we can kind of touch on those and build empathy for those. But in general, the education piece that we're delivering is all going to be the same, right? We're talking about generally the same profile, so we're just filling in the blanks, and that doesn't really take a lot of time. So for example, if you emailed me today and connected me with the teacher and she was like, yeah, that sounds great, let's look at a day and time, and it were next Wednesday, then that would give us plenty of time. As long as you got the pictures to me, that would give me plenty of time to just fill in the blanks and create the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else? Oops. All right, folks. Well, like I said, we cut it short. No, I talked too much. Sorry. We did not, but thank you guys for joining me and hanging in there. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. Otherwise, talk with your schools. Let's get those ability awareness presentations scheduled. And I look forward to working with you guys and your school. So have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
All right, you too.
See you at
Thank
the
you.
next one. Bye.